Hey guys, so today we're going to be starting on factoring using the GCF. So yesterday we talked about what the greatest common factor is and how we can identify it. So today we're going to be focusing on factoring using that GCF. This is our first day of factoring. Okay. So on the back page here, what I want us to do first is write our steps for factoring. Okay, so step one, we want to identify the GCF. Step one. Step two, I want to divide each piece of the polynomial by the GCF. 3, I'm going to put the GCF on the outside of my parentheses. So the GCF is going to go on the outside of the parentheses. What is left when you divide, or after you divide, stays on the inside of the parentheses. Okay. Also just note, remember or recall, when you divide exponents, you subtract the exponents. Okay. So this is going to be important when we pull out that GCF from our polynomial. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the front. So let's start with number one. So number one, we first want to identify our GCF. Okay, so what number is going to be the biggest factor that goes into 2 and 6? Okay, so 2. And then we have z squared and a z. So this would be like z times z and a z here. So we can only circle one of them. So we can pull one of the z's out. So when I divide each one of these numbers here by 2z, so I pull a 2z out. So 2z squared divided by 2z, I'm left with just a z. And then when I divide 6z by 2z, I'm left with just a 3. So I'm going to write that a little clearer over here. So my GCF is 2z, so I divide 2z squared by 2z. So my 2's cancel. 2 minus 1 is 1, and I'm left with just that z. And then my 3 that I get here would be 6z divided by 2z. So my z's cancel, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, so I'm looking for the GCF first, and then I'm dividing that GCF by each piece. Okay, so now let's look at number 2, my GCF. So what's the biggest number that I could divide both of these numbers by? So it looks like it's going to be 6 is the number. And I have an m squared and an m, so I can pull out one of the m's, okay? Because they both have at least one m. Because this is like m times m, and this is just m. So we have 1 and 1 that we could pull out, okay? So I'm going to pull out a 6m. So on the inside, I have 6m squared divided by 6m plus 12m divided by 6m. So these cancel, and then I would get 2 below. So I have 6m. This would just become a 2. And then a 6m squared divided by 6m. The 6 is canceled, and then 2 minus 1 is just 1. So it would be 6m times m plus 2. So this would be this answer. This was the answer here. A way to check it is when I multiply it back together, I get what I started with. So I would distribute this back in. So I get 6m squared plus 12m, which is what I started with. Okay? All right, so let's keep going. So 3y cubed and a negative 9y squared. So 3y cubed minus 9y squared. So my GCF here is going to be a 3. I can factor a 3 out from each one of these. And the biggest number of y's I could take out is 2, y squared. So I'm going to start by taking out a 3y squared. So then in my parentheses, it's like I have 3y cubed divided by 3y squared minus 9y squared over 3y squared. So when I simplify, so the 3's will cancel, y cubed over y squared is just y. And then I have that minus, the y squares cancel, 9 divided by 3 is 3. And again, I can check this by distributing it back in to make sure I end up with the 3y cubed minus 9y squared. Right. The next one, number 4, so I have a 5a cubed plus a 15a. So let's see, what's my GCF here? So definitely gonna pull out a 5 from both. So I can pull out 1a. So I'm gonna factor out a 5a. So I'm left with 5a cubed, it's like dividing by 5a, plus 15a over 5a. So the 5's will cancel here, and I have a 1 there. So I'm left with a 5a times 5a squared. The a's will cancel here, and then 15 divided by 5 is 3. And you could skip this step in purple here if you feel comfortable skipping that step. You don't have to show the division. I'm just showing it there for emphasis to show you essentially what you're doing when you're factoring something out. You're dividing it by everything in the polynomial. Okay, so let's move down below. So I'm going to switch colors. All right, so the GCF in this. All right, so we have a 20 and a 30. So both of these can be divided evenly by 10. The biggest common factor is 10. And don't worry, you could still list out all your factors and find the greatest common factor that way. Just in this video, I'm just showing you the main focus is on factoring. So I want to spend time showing you that. But you can still list out all the factors if you need to. So we have 10, and I have an x cubed and x squared. So my biggest is an x squared that I could take out. So I'm going to take out an 10x squared, and then in my parentheses, I have a 20x cubed divided by 10x squared plus 30x squared over 10x squared. So when I divide 10x squared, so 20 divided by 10, I get 2. X cubed divided by x squared is just x, because remember you're subtracting the exponents. 30 divided by 10 is 3, and my x squareds would cancel. So this would be my answer. There. All right, my GCF here. All right, so 5 and 2. Nothing factors out with 5 and 2, which is okay. The numbers don't always need to factor out. But there is, we can look at the numbers here, our exponents, our variables, and n to the 6th and n to the 5th. So our GCF is going to be n to the 5th because we can take out 5 n's from each one. So if I factor in n to the 5th, I have 5n to the 6th over n to the 5th plus 2n to the 5th over n to the 5th. So when I subtract the exponents, I'm left with 5n, and then these will cancel, plus 2. Okay, so my GCF is outside. When I divide, what's left stays on the inside. Let's look at this one. Okay, so number 7, my GCF, my greatest common factor here is going to be a 2 and an x, because this is an x squared and this is just an x, so I can only factor out 1x, and both of them are divided evenly by 2. So when I factor up that 2x, I'm going to have a 2x squared divided by 2x minus 8x over 2x. So my 2's will cancel, and x squared over x is just x. and then my x's will cancel here, and then 8 divided by 2 is just 4. So 2x times x minus 4 for that one. Okay. All right, and then the last one here, my GCF is going to be I can factor out just a 4, or I can factor out a negative 4. It doesn't matter. But if I factor out a negative, let's factor out a negative 4. Okay? So we'll factor a negative 4, and then with the r's, we have an r squared and an r, so we could just take out one of the r's. So we factor out a negative 4r, negative 4r squared over negative 4r, minus 28 r over negative 4r. So the 4's will cancel, and then I'm left with just an r. But if I have a negative over a negative, it's going to become a positive, so I'm just left with r. And then the r's will cancel here, and a negative 28 divided by a negative 4 becomes a positive 7. So if you factor out that negative, the signs on the inside of the parentheses are going to switch.